day 4, 1/4 done. So the first thing we talked about today, a little bit about course materials. Make sure you reflect on the work you do, and then look at the comments that I may make on that. We realize at times that we can easily run out of time with everything we have to do, but it's just that situation, and we got to work through it. The videos of the Zoom sessions, and then the whiteboard reviews are available. Images in Dropbox, and then a lot of things. I noticed some students saying, "Well, I looked in my notes." That's a real plus, taking some kind of notes, and especially when we have a process of how we get something done, and then you can just refer back to that when you need to do it again. A couple things about VLANs. You have VLANs beyond the local VLANs, so you could have VLANs set up for right here, and then if you set up VLANs over here, there is no relationship between those. There is no relationship between those set of VLANs. So if there's a 10 up here, it doesn't make a difference. Because if traffic moves through the router and it gets routed out over here, there's no tagging or anything done until it gets into this particular VLAN, unless you're doing sub-interfaces on the router, but we're doing the inter-VLAN routing inside the multi-layered switch. Careful when you delete VLANs, right? If you're going to delete a VLAN, you want to remove the ports first. Now, if you're going to erase the switch and reload it, then you'll delete the VLAN DAT, then erase the switch and then reload it. But if you're just deleting some VLANs, you want to take those ports out of those first. You can look later on, you can experiment with that. Inter-VLAN routing. One way to do that is like if you had 2 layer 2 switches in this scenario, if these were both, if you were using this as a layer 2 switch, you could create sub-interfaces here on the router and route between the VLANs. But then an issue can come with this particular traffic all aggregating to there. So back in the old days, that's what they did. They had a router, and you maybe had, old days, whatever that means, they had a couple switches and different VLANs running on there, and then you'd run sub-interfaces here. Well, all that traffic would have to go to here and come back inside that scenario. So somebody said, well, we can be pretty smart. We can take a router and a switch and put them together and make a multi-layered switch. Okay. And then we talked a little bit about adding an access point too. Okay, our little home routers are like a combination of all that. They have a router, like a firewall, not really a real firewall, but kind of like a firewall, depending on how much you spend. They also have wireless, coming off of them. So they're like a combination of this whole thing. So we have a multi-layered switch in which we can do the moving the traffic between VLANs very quickly. So this has become a very good way to manage your VLAN traffic. Here you have the access, and up here you have distribution. Exact same diagram. Here I was talking about access. I just mentioned that before. Adding a VLAN, so we'd have a trunk here, and you have a trunk here. And so then VLAN, like if you're talking about VLAN 10, remember these ports, the traffic moves through those ports based on the MAC address. So these are still, they're still ports using MAC addresses to move the traffic. Now if you say no switch port, then the port becomes a router port, and then you have to assign an IP to that. Assign an IP here, and then they need to be on the same network. Okay? So then what we decided to do was we did some work with addressing for our new scenario, and after the addressing we create the VLANs, back up the configs, clear our devices. Now we cleared just the routing, just the switches. So yeah, we were working on back up the configs. Whoa, let me straighten that out. Back up the configs, and then clear devices. And when you clear devices, you can see the VLAN DAT if you did a directory of flash : and then you're going to delete that, and then you're going to erase the startup config and then reload the devices. And then, what they did was they worked on, we worked on making sure you get that switch port set. That was the first thing. Make sure we connectivity with their router, and then the next thing they were to work on was the trunking before they started setting any switch virtual interfaces, or setting up your addressing, which they figured out here. So then once they have the basic configs in Cisco, then we had to have connectivity. Okay, so network, the IP interface on the router and the interface on the multi-layered switch. And when you did the multi-layered switch, you had to do that no switch port. Okay, on the switch that happened to be 13. This should have been fast. It should have been, whoa, let me undo that. That should have been up here. That's fast Ethernet 01, and the switch should have been fast Ethernet 013, only because that's how I hooked them up. And these are ports 24 down here. So set up those two things, that way I can get connectivity. I can come in here and I can telnet to the devices in order to help troubleshoot or just look at what you're working on. Okay, we port 23 we want to shut down. Port 24 would be our trunk, and if it's a 3550, it'll trunk automatically probably, and then you can go in, set the encapsulation to .1Q, and then set switch port mode trunk on your layer 2 device. Switch port mode trunk, show trunk to see them. Okay, so we wrapped up. Next thing, they created their VLANs. They assigned their IP addresses to them in their multi-layered switch. Turn on IP routing. Inside the switch, eventually you have to put a default gateway, a routing default gateway going out. Then they assign their ports. So come Monday, we'll have a way to turn it in. Now on the L2 switch, one for management and then other IPs for testing. A little confusing, but talk about that on Monday too. Inside their router, if you want to ping from anywhere down in here up to the router needs to know where those 10 networks are. So you have to have a route pointing back down in, a static route that says anything for 10, this location, 10 dot whatever yours is, send it to out this interface right here. Okay, or next hop is the interface inside the multi-layered switch. So key things left to do. We took the module 1 through 4. I took the exam, and everybody should have finished the packet tracer skills. It's on until Friday midnight if you want to retake it. But you should have taken it. It was due back Tuesday. As an example, if we were to look at one particular setup, this would be the IP route down in. You would need a default route coming out of your multi-layered switch. And then this is an example of sales VLAN and having it set up on both devices. Yeah, so we had the two sales, and the only reason you need this down here would be if you want to test with an extended ping. Now you will put a management VLAN on your layer 2 switch, and only the other ones for testing. Well, and that's it.